Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to working on our Master Grade 2.0 Gelgoog here, following some of the steps from the Gunpla Super Technique mook here. Easy modeling, easy for weekend modeling, no airbrush technique book here. So far, we haven't really used a lot of this in part one. If you guys haven't seen part one, you can go back and check that out. Essentially, we were just building up the Gelgoog as cleanly as we could because I'm not going to be fully painting the kit, not going to be airbrushing it. We are going to be putting on some paint on it, and that's going to be kind of the majority of what we're going to be doing today on it. Applying some paint and then some different weathering techniques and things like that on it. But if you guys didn't see in part one, we just built it up, did some physical damage on it, added some Zimmerit down there on the shoes, and that was kind of the majority of what we did in part one, but check that out if you guys missed it. For today's video, we're going to start off by putting some paint on here, and then we'll get down to business. So for the painting at this stage, all we're really going to be doing is trying to cover up these parts here where we added the Zimmerit on it. Also going to be doing some touch-up painting up here on top of the backpack, just because from the seam line removal process on that got a little miscolored from the glue. And the same thing here for the top of the bazooka, so probably just going to be putting some paint, not really all over this, but certainly on at least like the top part of this, and maybe adding some of our winter camo on here as well, which we'll get to after this. That's kind of the next step. But these SMS paints work really well with our theme of not airbrushing and kind of trying to go about this in very simple steps because these are pre-thinned. You can use them right out of the bottle. Now, hand painting with lacquer paints does have a bit of a trick to it and does take a bit of practice, but at least for our purposes for today, it doesn't really need to be anything super fancy. Basically, we just need to try to cover that color, but we do need to try to match the colors which are on here. So for the bottom part of the feet here, German gray should be pretty close. It's just a really dark gray. But for the top part, that's going to be a little bit more difficult to match. I think this Sasebo gray is going to be pretty close. Let's go ahead and just give it a try. By mixing that Sasebo gray with some kind of olive drab color, which I already had in there, it's actually giving me just about the right color of what's going to be matching right here. So sometimes by not cleaning your paint tray ahead of time, you can actually kind of take advantage of reactivating some of the colors that are left in there from before, which is what I wanted to do with this, and it actually worked out quite well. So you can see that color is matching pretty close. It's not exact, but I can kind of blend it in, and it is going to be covered up again later by some of the snow camo, like I said, that we're going to be adding to this. So let me just go ahead and finish this up here. Alright, so once that's all done, I also painted the exposed frame just so that it's uniform because the color here and the color here didn't match, and then also just to make it kind of stand out a bit more, just as being a different color there. And then the backpack is all done here as well, and the bazooka. So next up, I'm going to spray some matte top coat on this just to kind of level everything out, get rid of the shine, and give us a little bit of texture. Top coat, as you guys may know, will add a little bit of texture to that. So once we add the next steps, especially the layering steps, we'll have a little bit more to kind of grip onto if the plastic still has that shine to it, which I sanded most of this, so I actually probably could get by without giving this a coat of top coat, but just in case, I'm just gonna mist it a little bit. Oh, and also important step, don't forget to cover any clear parts. In this case, I put some masking tape over the clear visor on that before we spray any top coat on it. All right, so now we're getting to the interesting part that's probably either gonna make or break this kit. So applying the winter camo is going to be interesting, and a couple things to keep in mind. So let's just refer back to the book here. We're switching over to the Gyaradoga example here, and you can see from some of these photos kind of what it's meant to look like ultimately. That said, mine is going to look a little bit different, and a couple things to keep in mind for this white paint, which we're going to be putting on here. Now, This is just the Mr. Weathering color multi-white that I'm going to be using, only because that's what they use in the mook. I imagine you could use just any kind of white paint really for this. Just the white lacquer paint honestly would probably do the exact same job. But we'll see how it looks. Maybe I'll change my mind once I start putting it on there. Maybe I'll kind of realize something about kind of how it's going on that will maybe make it better suited. And as for the application of it, here's what we need to keep in mind is that the colors that the kit is supposed to represent the factory colors of the mobile suit. That's the colors that it was painted in as it's rolled out of the factory, and so that's a nice even color over the entire thing. As for this white camo, this is something that would probably be applied either in the field at some point, and it's just not really done to the same quality, so we can kind of work that into how we're applying the paint onto the product. It wouldn't cover every inch of the armor, and it also wouldn't be applied evenly over the entire area. It's not going to be painted over every area of the frame. It's going to be painted maybe just on some parts of the frame here and there, just kind of wherever they had paint, wherever they were able to put paint on it to just make it blend into a more wintry environment. We also need to keep in mind the damage, so I'm imagining that this was applied before the damage was done to the kit. So any area where it's damaged, we obviously don't need to paint the multi-white onto there because it's obviously already damaged and blown away. So paint around the frame, paint around the damage, and paint around any areas where it doesn't really make sense that the white camo would have been added onto, like some detailed areas like around the vents and things like that. So let me just keep on going with this and see how it comes out. Alright guys, so I'm pretty immediately finding out that it's not really gonna work. I think that doing it this way, and that for whatever reason my multi-white here is so much more thin than what it looks like it is in the book. So I think I'm just going to grab my paper towel and just wipe this off. I do want to stick with the idea though, so I'm just going to use some more SMS paint, just an off-white color of just lacquer paint for that. It's strange because this Mr. Weathering color, yeah, it's great for some things, but it's never really seemed like quite like thick enough that you could really use it for a paint like that. So it's, I don't know, it's weird. So if you guys have a different experience with it, maybe let me know. If mine is, I don't know, just something weird about it. But I'm just gonna use neutral gray here from SMS instead, and I think that this should work just as well for what we want to do with it anyway. Alright, so here is how it's looking, and I think it's going to be okay. This is what's commonly known as the ugly phase, and I wouldn't even necessarily say it's ugly, but it's definitely still got some work ahead of it. So next up, I'm going to use some of the Mr. Weathering color here. This is basically going to be for like panel lining, but also going to use it for just like a kind of general filter over it. Now, I tested it on a couple of parts here at the back just to kind of see which color was right. The ground brown, which I would normally use, especially for like a ground mobile suit like this, is a little bit too dark. We might use that in some areas, but I think generally I'm going to stick with the grayish brown for the majority of details and just kind of everywhere around on this, just to kind of, again, fill in some of the panel lines, details, things like that, give it a bit of a filter. Then we'll work on some more precise weathering around in different areas. So up next, I am going to switch to dark brown, but not the weathering color. I'm going to switch to just the panel line accent color because I feel like this will be better for what I want to do for this step, which is just some really precise panel lining that is not going to require any cleanup. Really carefully, some of these details, just some of the details that I want to darken up a little bit, areas where dirt would gather, even though it's in a snowy environment. There's still going to be like dirt and dust and obviously like I don't know, stuff from just ground warfare. Anyway, dirt in general of many types is going to gather in some of these areas, so just touching in some of the details, and then just also to help bring out the details also in the frame areas, to help bring out the details in the frame. As you guys are probably aware, you generally want to keep this out of the frame just because it can damage the plastic and cause breaks, and the plastic cracks and breaks, and it's just not good for the plastic. If the kit was fully painted, you have to worry about it less, but since obviously we didn't paint it, I am just gonna have to be a little bit careful about that. You can use it on the frame. The thing is that you just don't want the paint, or in this case this accent color, to just be sitting there on the frame, and especially getting into areas that it's not able to evaporate quickly, because this does evaporate quickly, but if it's in an enclosed area like inside the frame there, it can't. Since I'm going around and just being really slow and careful with it, I think I can probably keep it under control and keep it where I want it to go and away from dangerous areas. Now, another question you may be asking while we're here is, why am I keeping the entire model built and not separating it into sections? Wouldn't it be easier to work on if I broke it down into sections? And possibly yes, probably. I mean, yes, definitely. It would be easier to work on if you broke it down into sections. But there is a bit of a magic to it, for lack of a better word. When building it as a whole, I can keep an eye on making sure everything's consistent, and also just kind of keep in mind of where like dirt would gather, like for example just this part, which is like under an area here, whereas areas where it's like on the top, or just, you know, where gravity works, where dirt might collect. Just easier to kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at the model as a whole. Alright, so once that's all done, you can see some of the details sort of popping back out now from all being kind of lost in the white. And we'll bring out some more of that here, but what I want to do now is switch back to some lacquer paint, just using some SMS Camo Black. And I want to use this just around the damaged areas, just to give us a black base, and just basically because the lacquer will not be affected by whatever other paints we put on top of that. So just want to give us a nice black base for the damaged areas, just a little bit here and there, because then we'll apply some other metallics and other kind of weathering effects and things like that onto there, just using some enamels and other different weathering effect products. Also going to add a little touch of this SMS Hyperchrome Warm Tone around some of those damaged areas as well. This is like a really like shiny metallic color, just to give us again the look of melted burnt metal. Alright, next up, gonna do some chipping, and they're gonna do this in a couple of different ways. But first off, gonna be using some XF22 RLM gray, and what I wanna do with this is a similar color to the Gelgoog's original color. So what I'm gonna do with this is make it look like areas where the whitewash is worn away, so sort of recreating the look of the original color coming through the white, but we're actually kind of doing it in the opposite way. Alright, so finished that, ended up using some combination of some neutral gray mixed with that RLM gray for the gray color, the secondary color of the Gelgoog, and then some German gray for around the dark areas, just to give it the look of the whitewash scratched off there. I think it's looking pretty good. It's definitely coming together. Now for the next step, I'm going to be using a mix of the Mr. Weathering color once again, and the Mr. Weathering color solvent to do some streaking, and I'm going to be maybe doing a couple different kinds of streaking and chipping here with this. So again, with this, just kind of going to be working it into these areas, just to again Make it look kind of dark and charred and dirty. And then we'll pull it back with this solvent as well. Also gonna touch some in the like bullet dents, and then we can pull that to make it look like it's kind of a deeper dent that's then streaking. Okay, and then we're in the home stretch now, and I'm gonna switch over to using some Gundam markers, which is another thing that I've talked about that, I've in the past recommended in almost all circumstances to not use these, but they're used in the book, so I'm gonna use some here and now and show you guys. This is one way. I'm sure a lot of you guys may already know about this, but this is one way that these can be useful for just doing some chipping. I've got a couple different ones here from some different sets. This is like a silver one. What is this, to be precise here for you guys? Silver anyway, and then there's also some gray and dark gray here in this set. So I'm just gonna let some out here into a tray. Gonna put just a little bit of this on some edges just to kind of bring out some more worn areas here. And I'm gonna do this with the silver, but then also use some of the gray colors as well. Alright, last couple of steps, we're almost there. I can smell the end, but I'm gonna do some dry brushing and then some pigments here using the Tamiya Weather Master sets. So got a couple sets here. This is the Mud, Light Sand, Sand, and this is the Orange Rust, Gunmetal, Silver sets. But first, a little dry brushing, especially just on the frame, essentially for the exposed frame, just to kind of accentuate the frame a bit. I'm just gonna do a little bit of dry brushing here once again with some Gundam marker. Just gonna let some out into a container. This is, let's see, Gun Metallic is the number for this one. Finishing touch here time with the Tamiya Weathering Master set. Going to be using some of the gunmetal around some areas that would get smoke coming out of, like vents, things like that. Okay, so now some final top coat, and then really the last couple final finishing touches will be a couple things to add on there. Let's do it. And so I know I didn't talk much about the weapon, but as you can see, I basically applied the same process to this, but I wanted to apply the snow camo onto there, just onto the top in a way that looks like, this would have been applied onto the weapon, but not to any areas that might be sensitive as to how the weapon is going to work. So it's basically just kind of to the top part, just to give it a bit of that camo. But want to add some a lens piece here onto the front of this little camera part, and then onto the back part of here, the little screen right there. Going to use some of this leftover foil sticker. Yes, this is exactly why foil sticker sometimes does come in handy, and why when you see those videos, people just immediately throwing the foil sticker in the trash, you know that this is why foil stickers are sometimes very useful. Not a perfect fit, but considering that I just eyeballed that and didn't measure it at all, I'd say that looks pretty good to me. What do you guys think? Now for the jewel at the front, I'm gonna use a little drop of super glue here for this one. It's gonna be really hard to see as it's kind of in like behind there, but there you can see how that's looking anyway. Alright guys, so let's take a look now at the final product. Before I do, just want to tell you guys that this was a lengthy process going through a lot of steps. I tried to showcase a lot of steps from the book. I did kind of have to make some adjustments along the way to kind of use a little bit different materials from what's in the book, but I basically wanted to try to go through and note some different techniques that I thought looked especially interesting, some of which were new to me, some of which were just kind of a little bit different ways to do things that I've maybe done a little bit before. But I think, as you guys will see here from the finished product, that it came out looking pretty good. I will say it's not perfect by any means, and this was definitely very much an experimental piece. And it's experimental in the sense that, like I said, I was trying out some new and kind of a little bit different techniques. I'm still very much not, an expert when it comes to weathering. I do try to kind of take certain things in mind, about, where the weathering goes, for what particular reason, the story behind the weathering, things like that. Is what I do try to keep in mind. It's just the actual implementation of it, I think, is where I definitely still need some work, but there's that. And then there's also just the patience aspect of it. Weathering, especially on a model of this size, weathering, is going to take a long time to really do it to a really, really good degree. And this was something that I wanted to try to finish quickly for a couple of reasons. Number one, just because I'm an impatient person. Number two, just because that the whole theme of this was based around the mook, where it's supposed to be like easy weekend modeling. So like it should be relatively simple and quick steps in order to create quote unquote professional results without the use of an airbrush. And I mean, the amount of different things that you can do without an airbrush, they kind of make it seem like, the only way to get professional results is with an airbrush. But I mean, there's so many different techniques and everything in here that, I mean, it really kind of runs the entire gamut of Gundam mecha modeling in general. And an airbrush is one tool that you certainly can use, for getting really good results in your Gunpla. But I think, as this result may show, but certainly some of the results in the mook itself certainly showed off the fact that there's a lot of really great finishes that you can do with your Gundam models without the use of an airbrush. I mean, it's one tool, albeit a very important tool and a very useful tool for sure, but it's one tool amongst, dozens, if not hundreds of different, tools and different ways to use them and different techniques that you can use for your Gundam models. So it's just something interesting to consider, and I think why this was an interesting project to work on. I hope you guys enjoyed it. One thing that I've talked about in the past, and I'll just bring up, once again, is that one thing that I've really learned a lot from in the last couple years is through my friendship with Lincoln and his experience, talking a lot with him about his experience in the professional modeling world there in Japan, is how production models are made. And his experience stems more from the Machine & Krieger science fiction models, of course. But, a lot that I've learned from him about that, I'm sure, applies to how the production models are made for Gundam. And what I mean by that is the models that you see in the images, like official images from Bandai, for the images of the model kits in the box art and things like that. Those are the production models that are usually made very quickly and using a lot of the same techniques like what we see in books like this. Those models are not made like for GBWC competition. They're just made to look good for the box art, look good for magazines, and that's it. A lot of times they're on a very tight schedule for producing those kind of works. And so learning about kind of shortcut techniques, I don't want to say that in the sense that it makes it feel like it's not a valid way to build models, because it certainly is, as demonstrated in the production models, but it's kind of shortcuts, I guess, as to what, a lot of people consider to be the right way to do things. There isn't really a right way to do it so long as you're able to get the results that you want. And what I think this book demonstrated, and what I wanted to try to demonstrate to you guys, was that you can get really good, professional quote unquote results by, sometimes taking the easier or the shorter route and doing different techniques that aren't considered the traditional way to go about it by a lot of people, but you can still get really good results. And it's all about, trying things out, experimenting, seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. And another thing that I've kind of really grown fond of, another idea that I've grown fond of in the past couple years, and again, this is actually something that I've talked a lot with Lincoln about, and something that I hope that you guys will take to heart as well, is just the fact that, sometimes a finished product, not sometimes, all the time, a finished product is going to be better than a perfect product. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, I believe is how the saying goes. So, sometimes a model may not be turning out the way you want, or you may be trying out a technique and you're not exactly sure if you're doing it the right way, but just trying it out and doing it is the best way to learn how to do it the right way, or sometimes how to do it the wrong way. You figure it out, well, that didn't work, and then next time, and every time, you know, going forward, you know how to go about different techniques in different ways that may work for what you want to do or may not work for what you want to do. And so the best way to learn new techniques is just by trying them out sometimes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, I'm pretty happy with a lot of the results with this. I think there's certainly areas where, you know, it could have been done better, you know, taking more time with it, or maybe doing a little bit more research into how some of the techniques, you know, should be done the proper way. But I just kind of wanted to basically go by what was in the book, go by what kind of limited knowledge I have already. And at the end of the day, I had fun with the project. I think it came out looking pretty cool. So let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comment section below. As always, looking forward to hearing what you guys think about it. And if you have any further questions, of course, feel free to let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Of course, if you guys want to check out some model kits to experiment on for yourself, tools, paints, and supplies, all that kind of good stuff, you can check out the link in the video description to USA Gundam Store. If you guys would also like to like and or subscribe while you're here as well. If you enjoyed this video and the previous video and just the videos here on the channel in general, really appreciate all your guys' support. Thank you so much. Until next time, hope you guys are all having a great day and have fun. See you guys.